Hello, and thank you for joining me today as we begin our discussion on the muscular system. So this is going to be the beginning of our muscle system unit, where we're going to learn about the anatomy of a muscle, along with being able to name different muscles of the body, and a couple more other things in there as well. So this first section, I split section 1 into two parts. So 5.1a is anatomy of a muscle. We'll finish it up with 5.1b. But here we go. So objectives. In this section, we're going to correctly label the parts of a muscle. So there's different parts. We're going to be able to name those. We're going to understand how a sarcomere works and explain how muscles contract. And then you will be able to correctly label a sarcomere picture. The next three are going to be on the next video. So that's where we're going today. So for starters, you have the structure of a muscle. So individual muscles are separated from others by this thing called fascia. Fascia is a dense connective tissue that surrounds a muscle cell, or surrounds a muscle. And this is how we get different muscle groups. They're separated by fascia. This is the sheath of tissue surrounding a muscle, similar to the periosteum surrounding bone. Very similar. This fascia extends out beyond the muscle itself. And so it covers the muscle and then extends farther. And that's what forms a tendon. So that's what connects the muscle to the bone, is that fascia there. And so when this extension becomes inflamed, that's what we call tendinitis. So irritation or inflammation of that fascia extending out. So this is a picture of a muscle. And so this will be we call this the belly of the muscle, which is surrounded by, you'll get is the epimysium. And this is your fascia, outer layer of fascia. Is going to extend out this way. This is your tendon that extends out and connects the muscle to the bone. And so tendinitis is inflammation somewhere in here, is how that works. Here's a look at skeletal muscle again. Muscle fibers are here. You have this extension piece. Here is your tendon there. These guys, these connection points, because this is bone to bone, these are ligaments, which bind bone to bone instead of muscle to bone. So that's the difference between tendons and ligaments. All of your muscles, the way muscles work is they work by contraction. And so the only thing muscles can do is they can shorten and then they can relax to get back to their normal length. But they cannot push. They cannot extend out to move something. So they pull on bones to move joints. And they create movements again by shortening. They can only shorten. And they lengthen by relaxing. They can't actually force themselves out. And so that is how muscles work. I talked in that previous picture, I'll give you another picture here after this, that belly of the muscle is surrounded, the entire muscle, the whole muscle itself is surrounded by what's called the epimysium. So epi meaning outside and mysium referring to muscle. Within your whole muscle, you have these individual bundles of muscle fibers, and we call those fascicles. So a large cluster of muscle tissue is called a fascicle. And each of those fascicles are surrounded by another layer of fascia. And this is called the perimysium. Para being around, mysium being muscle. The perimysium, or the fascicle, can be broken down a little bit farther into smaller clusters of muscle fibers. And these are muscle fibers which are encompassed by endomysium. And then the fibers themselves are made of a bunch of myofibrils, which is the unit that actually allows muscles to contract and relax. And we're going to look at those here shortly. So in this case, this would be the belly, which is surrounded by the epimysium. This would be a fascicle, which is surrounded by the perimysium. And this is going to be the muscle fiber, which is there, surrounded by the endomysium, is how all of that breaks down. You'll have a picture similar to this that you will need to be able to label. So the belly, the epimysium, the fascicle surrounded by the perimysium, and the muscle fibers surrounded by the endomysium. And we said the muscle fibers are made of these things called myofibrils. Myofibrils are made of two parts that allow it to work and function and contract. The two parts of a myofibril are called myosin and actin. Myosin is thicker, actin is thinner. We're going to look at these together. So this is known as a sarcomere. So this is your thin actin and your thick myosin. And this forms a sarcomere. So a sarcomere is a functional unit of a muscle. And so a sarcomere goes from this point all the way to this point. That is a sarcomere. That's a functional unit. And a bunch of sarcomeres make up a myofibril. And so with these, you have some different pieces. So we have our H zone, which is the gap between two different pieces of actin, is our H zone. Our M line is the medial line, the line in the middle. Our A band encompasses everything that is within your myosin. So everything from here over is our A band. And I should undo this quick. I should make that green so you can see it. And I should use a highlighter to make it a little thicker. Oh, I wanted green. So this is our A band here, which includes all of the myosin and some of the actin, depending on where the sarcomere is at. That is your A band. Then you have, we talked about the M line. The Z line is the line that separates your actin from one another. So the Z line is separating the two actin pieces, or connects the two actin pieces. And so as this one shortens, as this actin gets pulled this direction, it pulls with it this actin, which pulls the myosin, and that's how everything tightens. Is everything contracts and the myosin is pulled together, but the actin is what moves to do that contraction. So here's a different look at it. So here's your sarcomere. You have your myosin is this thick piece, the actin is the little pieces. The Z line separates your actin. The M line separates, or is the middle piece that the actin can't touch because they're separated by the M line. We have your H band, which goes from one actin to the other actin. Your A band goes from the myosin all the way across, includes all of this. So this is H. A includes everything. Your I band is your gap from one myosin to the next myosin, is your I band. We talked about the Z line, which is the gap between the two actins, and the M line is in the middle where the actins cannot meet. But those are all different terms used to describe parts of a sarcomere. When muscles contract, they get smaller. So in this case, we're looking at skeletal muscle. We know that because 1, you can see the striations, which are the lines, and 2, there's a whole bunch of nuclei per cell. So this is skeletal muscle. When these contract, these bands here are going to get shorter. The striations are going to get closer together. That's going to be your contraction piece. And when we do all of this, they've created what's known as the sliding filament theory, which is the theory that explains how muscles contract, which basically states that your actin is pulled by the myosin to contract and shorten the muscle, and then it relaxes and reopens. But that's the sliding filament theory, is the actin and myosin contract to shorten muscles and allow movement. A sarcomere is your functional unit of a muscle cell, a skeletal muscle, and it's created and utilized by actin sliding past myosin, shortening the sarcomere, which shortens your H and your I bands. So if we go back, your H band is here in between the two actins, so this gets shorter as your actin gets pulled closer together, as these get closer. And then your I bands, because this contracts and that contracts, this gets pulled closer together as well, closer to that Z line. And that is how movement works. Here are some review questions for you to look at. So pause the video, answer the questions. If you're confused on some of these, please come talk to me. We will clear it up a little bit for you. And then we'll continue on with video 1B for this particular unit. So what are the parts of a muscle unit? Think big to small, so a muscle from the outside in. The functional unit of muscle is called what? There are 2 proteins that make up this term, and then explain how those work together. But thank you for your effort and attention today. Again, talk to me if you have questions. If not, I will see you when you return, or we'll talk on the next video. But enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you later.